Hi, I'm Maris Kreisman, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you tonight to another excellent virtual event at McNally Jackson. If you go to McNallyJackson.com and look at our events calendar, you'll see all the amazing writers and programs we're hosting in the coming weeks. So please keep an eye on the site or subscribe to our newsletter to hear more about what's coming soon. There will be time at the end of tonight's conversation for your questions, so start thinking about them now, and then you can put your questions in the Zoom chat. We're so glad that even though we can't all be in the same room at the moment, we're still able to host events during this difficult time. As we've weathered the pandemic and reopened all 4 of our locations for browsing and shopping, indie bookstores like ours still need more support. And so if you enjoy free events like this one and want us to keep hosting more of them, please buy books from us. Throughout the evening, I'll post links in the chat to buy books from tonight's readers from McNally Jackson. And I'm always so delighted to introduce a new Pigeon Pages. And so welcome to the April edition. And I'm so pleased to introduce your host, Jiordan Castle, the author of the chapbook, All His Breakable Things. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Hobart, HuffPost, New Ohio Review, The New Yorker, and elsewhere. She's an editor-at-large for Pigeon Pages and a contributor to the LA-based food and culture magazine, Compound Butter. Welcome, Jiordan.
Thank you so much, as always, to Maris and McNally Jackson. And just like selfish love Maris plug that Maris celebrated 100 episodes of the Maris Review. And I was there last night and it was incredible. Just mind you, go and see and listen to that. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our April Pigeon Pages event. You all could be doing anything right now, and I'm very glad that you are here with us tonight. So just big thank you for being here. I'm thrilled to have Jade, Al, and Nina with us tonight to share their work. We will have a moderated Q&A after everyone has read, so be prepared for that, at which point you're welcome to post questions in the chat, and I will review them as they come in and ask any and all appropriate questions. I don't know why you would ask inappropriate questions, but just in case you were thinking about it. There will also be links to buy books from tonight's authors directly from McNally Jackson. So please do consider buying a book just like you would, I assume you would, if we were doing this in person together. And I will tell you, these are good books. You want to get them. If you already own them, you got to get a second copy so you can lend the first one out. And now just a quick announcement before we get to our incredible readers. Pigeon Pages is an all volunteer reading series and online journal. So donations help make it possible to pay our contributors, fund our contests, and other good stuff like that. So if you're interested in donating to help fund those initiatives, you can do so online really easily. And I'll get a link in the chat in just a minute. We're always open for general submissions as well, and we would love to read your work. So just head to pigeonpagesnyc.com and be sure to follow us everywhere on social media to keep up with all the things we're doing and all the things we're publishing. So with that, just thank you again so much for being with us tonight. I am very excited to introduce our first reader of the night, Jade. Jade Yeung is a Toisanese American writer from Brooklyn, New York. They have received support from the Community of Writers and Fine Arts Work Center and attended workshops at Tin House and Vona. Their writing has appeared in Lammergeier, Indolent Books, A River Sings series, and the Olive Tree Review. Currently, Jade is pursuing an MFA at Rutgers Newark, where they're a trustees fellow. You can find them on Twitter and Instagram at Jade Disc, and that's Jade Disc with a K. Thank you, Jade.
Yes, thank you so much, Jiordan and Nina and Albert. And I see some familiar faces and names. And thank you, Pigeon Pages, for welcoming me to the flock. It's been a really great experience to be a reader for them. So I would just dive right into the 3 poems I have for you today, and just a bit of context for them. It's gonna get heavy quick. So 2 of the poems have this character called the Brother Cop, and he is based on the brother who sexually abused me and then later became a cop. And these poems are from a collection where I'm doing a lot of things, and one of them is interrogating the police state and carceral state as an incest survivor. So that's just a content warning for everybody that the poems deal with child sexual abuse and racial violence. And the second poem deals with the death of Akai Gurley at the hands of Peter Liang. And in the poem, there's a Cantonese word that's crossed out. You won't be able to see it, but it's considered offensive in some contexts. The word itself isn't offensive, but depending on the context, it can be. And you'll just hear me pause when I come to that word. And I just want to say, if you're not familiar with the Liang case, I just highly recommend you watch the documentary Down a Dark Stairwell. And lastly, I just want to boost a fundraiser that is out there right now to help Akai's family attend a street naming ceremony in East New York. And I'll drop the link later. But I think because at least one of these poems deals with these issues and causes, I think it's really important that I support them, and folks that are invited to my poetry also support them, or at least the least I can do is sort of boost them. Okay. So I'll just dive right in. And thank you again, everybody. Caprine. I gifted Marcello a tiny ceramic sheep because it's us, baby. Happy anniversary. We're the same when I confuse the zodiacs, two Leos born in different years. I love it, but why a sheep? I'm a rooster. I couldn't tell you whether I'm a goat or a sheep, a caprine or a caprine. In English, they say goat, but the red gold New Year's decorations are impossibly cute rams, big sweet faces and fluffy horns. Marcello's arrested after a wrong positive ID. The precinct clerk assures me he won't see Rikers. Well, that's not how the system works. I hold every curse inside me. My baby in the other room goes, lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. He's released that night, though the charge follows him out. We are not the same. My earliest memory of guilt. I broke a ceramic rooster, took the fragments to the alley and hid them under a bucket. Eventually, I led Grandma there and showed her my accident. I hid my shame for as long as possible. Officer Peter Liang testified he never really touched his firearm training manual. NYPD's Glock. NYPD's Glock has twice the trigger resistance. What accident, what shadow of shame does he whimper behind? Breathing, blue, sacrificial lamb, did he steal a life where he saw none? Did he think A was a ghost already? Hawk like his Glock, foreign like our ancestral faces. Before my brother cop was a cop, someone kicked in his back for blocking a stairway. Fuck you, he fired like an American. What power he cocked with language. I know how innocent we want to seem when a white man hands us a gun. A bullet, its universal steel, is never lost in translation. This dark stairwell, its broken light, a light which shots darkness and a father's goodbye no God wants. God, go back, make the bullet ricochet like a skimming stone sunk on some pond, turn a Kyla's funeral dress to an Easter dress, turn a pattern of teeny black hearts to bubble gum, Polly pocket-sized, pink houses, berry crushed, blush coral. Oh God, go back. Hippocampus split. In a ritual of trespasses, I've forgotten the first trespass. Before language, there's body, what it remembers when I do not. To survive, there's willed forgetting. What tendons keep from the brain, like secrets. Fingers, all they did, point, claw. Can I? Can you? Why don't you make any sounds? Brother Cop asked. Questions do not mean choices. I see now. Pleasure is loud in the blood when welcomed. Who was she? This trammeled baby doll, its rosebud lips agape, salt, milk, its shunted brain, wide plastic eyes. Let's keep this between us, he said. They control what is not theirs. They say, protect women and children. They hide within many narratives. I want what is mine. Once we discovered a nest tucked deep in a tree. He thrusted his hand in. Thank you so much, everyone.
Jade, thank you so much for that. That was beautiful. You had me at teeny black hearts. I mean, you had me before that, but I just appreciate any Polly Pocket-sized image ever. So thank you. That was lovely. And we have more poetry up for you next. Next we have Albert Abonado, which I hope, Al, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. I've not had to say it out loud, but he is the author of Jaw, published by Sundress Publications in 2020. He teaches creative writing at SUNY Geneseo. Albert has received fellowships from the New York Foundation for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. His poems and essays have appeared in Boston Review, Colorado Review, Hobart, Poetry Northwest, Redivider, The Margins, Zone 3, and others. He hosts Flour City Yawp on WAYO 104.3 FMLP. He lives in Rochester, New York with his wife. You can find him at albertabonado.com. Welcome, Al.
Thank you so much for that, Jordan. And thank you also to Pigeon Pages, everyone at Pigeon Pages and McNally, for hosting this reading series. I mean, you guys are like the lifeblood right now for a lot of us, and so I really appreciate you making this space and helping support a lot of us. Thank you, Jade, for that gorgeous reading. That was really, really beautiful. And Nina, I'm really looking forward to hearing your work as well. So I'm going to read a couple poems from the book Jaw, and a couple newer pieces too. All right. This is Luxury. Today, I do not think about death, not the brittle skulls of children or the metal in their blood that passes for bullets. I do not think about the bones of birds or the blackberry seeds left in the belly, the time a muscle takes to go blue from a deflated lung, not the bright jaws of insects that come for the flesh, the meat. I do not think of grief as a color on my aunt's tongue, her face a country of fires. I do not think about kissing my grandfather in his coffin, not the temperature of his lips. Today I lose count, forget about sorrow and its teeth, regret and its prickled skin, how to pray for the dead I do not have to bury, that hymns turn my mouth into a sun, that terror can be the same word for skin or brain. Forget I do not speak Chinese or have to correct anyone who asks if I speak Chinese. Say no. I am afraid I am Filipino. Say, I do not speak Tagalog either. I do not ask anyone to forgive me for forgetting, and this is the oldest joy. Let me forget that I cannot hold the moon to feed it peppers when I want, that the rain in the trees is not a rapture, an applause for the rose on my shoes, that I do not blister and crack from holiness. Today, I am holy, and when I split my lip on the fist of my brother that was holy too, and when I kneel in the center of an empty parking lot, I do so grateful I can taste my blood. I'm just like imagining the applause in my head. I see hands clapping. I'm like, just gonna fill that in. This is the greeting. In Walmart or in Macy's, when my father's eyes take the shape of a moon I have not seen, when covered in smoke or storm, I know that look, that urge to gauge a prospective countryman with a phrase I cannot call my own, that carries the flames of a distant countryside, whose roads are colors he does not see anymore here amidst all of this abundance. There, my father and a stranger stand surrounded by the latest trends in length and texture. Talk about mortgages, about the taste of the air and unbearable humidity. To the ones who do not recognize my father's call as their own, forgive him this loneliness, the islands he thought he heard rattling in your throat, the glaze on your skin he mistook for salt and ocean, for volcanoes and birds and the bones of giants. Forgive him the street and all of its fires, the flood in which his sister is always drowning. Into my hand, my father shoves a fistful of shirt with "Made in the Philippines" printed on its tag. Perhaps we discuss the murkiness under which such fabrics are produced. No, the role of the son is not to strip such joy from his father, who holds in his hand the horizon as a second skin. Instead, how much pressure does a needle need to penetrate this cloth, to break the skin where a splinter rests? When my father speaks, I dream of the color of his tongue, how it contracts, isolated, enters the world already heavy and blackened. I dream of all the blood it takes to say hello. All right, so I'm going to read a couple of newer pieces. What I like about reading on my monitor, it looks like I'm looking at you. I'm just like not, but I cannot see anything. This is advice for using blood in a poem. If someone suggests you use words besides blood in your poems, make it part of a recipe. Try dinuguan, for example. Make your blood impossible to avoid. Another name for this dish is chocolate meat, the names your aunts used to hide from you the fact you were eating pork blood with your rice. Other ingredients may include garlic, onions, liver, pork belly, dried bay leaf, vinegar, chicken stock, etc. Say you know the difference between blood and sweetness. Say you hate the taste of liver. Think of the blood in your poem as a lie. Say this is also your blood. The Spanish explorer Miguel Lopez de Legazpi and the Datu Sikatuna, who poured blood from their left arms into the same cup, mixed it with wine before drinking. Make a sculpture for the promises you have made with blood that belonged to someone else. Put it on an island you have never visited and encourage others to see it. Dream about a volcano and an earthquake, about the gunfire the day they carried your grandfather to the cemetery after he cracked his skull on the bathroom floor, about the hair of your parents sticky with blood, the glass beneath their skin, the scabs on their lips. When you came to retrieve their luggage, their sandy fishing gear from the wreckage of their car, you found the bloodstains on the exposed airbags, the dashboard, the jacket wet with rainwater wedged between the seats. Consider the insects that gathered around all the blood you would not touch. Count the number of times this blood appears. When you close your eyes, what is the color of your blood? No cheating. This is going to be my last poem, and thanks again for listening. This is From the Trees Full of Birdsong Comes Unripe Fruit, after Rick Barat. How I start a prayer. With the same hand I use to lift food to my mouth, I draw a line down to my navel, pulling a zipper or curtain string to reveal the small wolf in my belly, the one I feed fat and vinegar. This is also how I pray. At 11, I leapt off the awning of my house. It was autumn, and everything that surrounded me collapsed back into the dirt. I wanted to practice my falling, feel the earth bend beneath my arrival, convinced I would not break. When my mother prays in her garden, after the surgery on her arm and neck, I listen to her bones grinding beneath her skin. She plants tulips, brushes a root from her hair, slices for dinner that evening the garlic and onions she will saute in a wok with ground beef. And this too is a prayer. My father rolling up his sleeve to reveal the long scar on his arm to a room full of strangers at the garage where they kept the wreckage of his car. A prayer about the flesh around a knuckle and the alloys the body will not reject. By prayer, I mean I read the same poem over and over until my hair becomes sloppy with poem, that I eat it slowly until it coats my mouth. All of my prayers begin with hunger, a prayer in the shape of cold fried chicken at my uncle's wake, in the blood stew I fail to replicate. My wife wants to know why I reduce my poems to something that fits in my mouth. I don't tell her I buried my relatives in my throat, that my prayers belong to other voices. When I pray, I can't hear my acid reflux gurgle, but the trees full of birdsong, the tires hiss as they pass over a wet road. This is a prayer full of rain and fog, weather soaked through my old shoes, the thin fabric that contains the storm beneath my feet. If by prayer we also mean the stories that we did not know came before us, then this is also a prayer. My father stepping away while they lowered his father into the ground as we tossed white flowers onto his coffin. The hour in which my brothers and I turned to one another and asked, where did he go? What is he doing now? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's funny. It's like going to a concert for me sometimes where I think, oh, I hope they play this song. And I'm so excited. I was thinking about when advice on using blood in a poem first came to my inbox and I sent it to everybody. So it was lovely to hear that live. Thank you so much. And last but never ever least, we have Nina Renata Aron, who is the author of Good Morning, Destroyer of Men's Souls, a memoir of women, addiction, and love. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the New Republic, the Guardian, Jezebel, and elsewhere. Please welcome Nina.
Hi, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Maris and McNally Jackson, and especially Pigeon Pages. This is so great. And Jade and Albert, really tough acts to follow. Beautiful, beautiful work. I wrote a memoir. I tried to find pages that were poetic because I was a little intimidated by reading with poets. But I'm going to read a couple pages from the very first couple pages of my book, and then a couple pages from deeper in, and should probably also offer a content warning that this is a book about a relationship with a man who's addicted to heroin, so they're her drugs. On a hunter's moon, I burned his name. The drummer in my band told me to do it. We were sitting at the bar drinking well whiskeys and cans of beer. A hunter's moon is powerful for intention setting, she said, winding her long, chemically straightened hair into an apple fritter-sized bun atop her head. She secured it not with an elastic, but with a wrist flick and a twist of another piece of hair, some sleight of hand I'd always envied in the girls who could do it. It stayed in place perfectly. She pulled a few baby hairs out to fall in front of her ears, and they made small, wispy parentheses around her face. Fleetwood Mac was playing. Write down what you want and burn it, she said, knocking back the last of her drink. Women suggest these types of things to one another. A hunter's moon is powerful for intention setting. This was the kind of oblique advice I was getting a lot. I didn't know where to hook into it, how to listen better to make it feel real, like something I could act on. Still, I let it wash over me, this language I was trying to learn. My earnest, beautiful California girlfriends, knowing I needed them, were doing their very best, circling with candles and crystals. I welcomed their warmth the way I imagined I was supposed to, with an open, wistful gaze and slow, new age nodding. Just that week, one had shown up with a bottle of rosé and made the measured, straight-faced suggestion that I sage him from the premises. This will cleanse your space of him, she said, proffering a bound, faded bundle of expired flora and a lighter. I was constantly cleansing him from my space. Every few days, for example, I'd clean our bathroom, wiping with Lysol-drenched paper towels the delicate spray of dried blood that lay over most surfaces and reminded me of the splatter of colored dye on the outside of a jawbreaker, the first layer that makes a white paste in your mouth as you suck it away. Living with a junkie involves a lot of effluvia. Everywhere there are oozes that must be wiped away. It seems there's simply more of it all. The sweat that goes immediately cold on the dysregulated slab of his body, piss that didn't make it into the toilet bowl. There's blood and vomit every day, and the rotten volcanic secretions of abscesses. And when I come home from work and he lunges for me, kisses me, all baby, and half on the nod, and we fuck dreamily, devotedly on the couch, there's spit and there's cum. Sometimes in the trash can, I find wadded up paper towels or bits of toilet paper he's used to wipe the blood away himself. And sometimes blood-stained t-shirts or socks or floral dish towels, which stiffen as they dry as though rigor mortis has set in. I don't know how to tell my friends, those well-meaning rays of blonde hope, that intention setting was already my life. Intention setting was the blistering fever that came over me when I couldn't reach him, and I had to type fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, over 4 inches of an email box, my version of a breathing exercise, until I could calm down and go back to my work. My draft folder was full of these 10-point fuck you blocks and hundreds of other half-written love letters and hate letters I'd nearly lobbed his way, all intentions to reform or renounce him. Intention setting was what I was doing all those mornings I pulled the car over to cry with my head on the steering wheel. It was the cement resolve I felt harden in my gut when I saw how much money was missing from my bank account. It was the ominous thump of my own helplessness, the rhythm of my days and nights. What I needed was something for intention keeping. Do they make a tincture for that? I wanted to ask. Some rose petal elixir to heal me? Later that night, I did as my drummer friend said. I stood above my kitchen sink, swaying slightly, rocking the bourbon baby of my body, and burned a small strip of printer paper on which I'd written KMS, I am letting go of you, in junk drawer ballpoint pen. I'd considered I want to let go of you. Write down what you want, she'd said, but that seemed too aspirational, not present tense enough. No, I don't want to, I am. The paper curled hot orange and tears welled in my eyes as the flame climbed slowly closer to my hand. I wanted it to be satanic, dark, measured wildness of casting a spell, untying and setting loose some force in the universe. It felt more like something out of a Taylor Swift video, a pathetic, over-earnest micro-victory against obsessive love while my eyeliner ran. The tiny blaze appeared perfectly controlled. I let the ashes fall into the dirty cereal bowls, narrowing my eyes to summon the sense that this time would be consequential. I really mean it this time, the refrain of sick people the world over. The thing is, you do mean it each time. That night, I certainly did. I swallowed the lump in my throat and thought, I am letting go, motherfucker, starting right now. I have just another page and a half that I'll read. This is from a little bit past the middle of the book about love. I love you is always a quotation, writes Jeanette Winterson on the first page of Written on the Body, the Bible of love books, the Buddha at the center of my shrine to erotic obsession, to infidelity justified by temporary insanity. She's right. I love you is a citation, a reference to one's past, to the entire past, to history. I love you is both singular and iterative. It denotes millennia of humans clamoring for meaning, for immortality, a symphony in one note. As our love came into full mad flower, I searched for solace in Winterson and elsewhere, steadying myself through others' tales of desperate love, stories I realized I'd been collecting rather compulsively my entire life. My love arsenal was comprised of hundreds of songs, novels, and films, and Falling for Kay offered an opportunity or an excuse to go back through them all, sewing all the while the tapestry of our story, which was every bit as exhilarating and as tragic as any I'd collected, as any that came before. This was something I'd always done, a way of grounding myself, situating my narrative among others I'd learned and loved. It was perhaps also a way of elevating us. After all, a keen literary attention to detail had formed the bedrock of my desiring life. My sense of romance was informed by the idea of a man hyper-attuned to specificity, a man in a reverie over the clasp of a woman's necklace, the gather of her stockings at her ankles. In the corner, in a trench coat, her hair gleaming, sits a silent girl with a face like a bird, writes James Salter in A Sport and a Pastime. One of those hard little faces, the bones close beneath it, a passionate face, the face of a girl who might move to the city. It seemed to me at the time that technology had destroyed certain forms, not merely of romance, but of interest, curiosity, that a certain kind of fixatedness was dead. On the train, people looked at their phones. They collapsed their biographies into personal ads and used computers to find dates. They ordered books one at a time from warehouses controlled by robots. With the entire human catalog of pornographic images and acts freely available on the internet, it sometimes seemed there was nothing left to imagine, and no one really minded. But in Kay's obsession with me, there was a charmingly outmoded fixatedness that I cherished, a fine-grained attention to the minutiae of me so intense it was almost frightening. In the laser beam of his gaze, I came radiantly alive. Suddenly, strangely, unmistakably, I was legible, an open book. His love invited me to perform every femininity I could possibly want, every character I'd ever read, every starlet I'd ever wanted to be. He could see it all. He wanted it all, every inch of me, every word, urge, hormone, every costume change. I felt how I've always wanted to. I was safe and beautiful, pinned like a butterfly, still containing mysteries in my diaphanous wings. I was a looker, a hooker, a tired middle-aged professional coming home to make stir fry and make her husband listen to her yammer on about the day. I was a teenager with cramps. I was a frontierswoman hanging the washing on the line, squinting against a gust of prairie wind. I was a mob wife, clad in black lace with lipstick the color of blood, making his dinner. I was a worthwhile object of obsession. I was no one special and didn't care because I was with him.
I mean, that's amazing. It's so funny to me that, the intimidation about poetry, like that's poetry right there. But that was
Thank
so
you, Jiordan.
beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And now we move into our exciting moderated Q&A where I see we already have a question. I just want to remind everybody, if you're thinking this is a very invasive question, but I want to ask it anyway, maybe don't do that. But I love the idea of thoughtful, crafty questions. So please do get them in the chat. This one, oh, I love this. I was going to start off with one of mine, but we're going to start off with this one. Question for any or all. Let's say all of you, maybe. Do you see your writing transform thoughts and memories into ideal constants? Does it ever leave you with the certainty of what is? It's very big brain question. Whoever wants to take that first. No wrong answer here.
I'll answer if I'm understanding the question correctly, which I'm not certain I am, but I don't ever feel that I'm left with any certainty at all about anything. I mean, I definitely think that in transforming, in the case of my book, many, many memories into something a little bit more stable or static, I still came up against at every turn the quality of memory that is just always unpin downable. I mean, I sort of arrived at like a consensus about certain things by checking in with my parents or my sisters or certain friends, like, is this how this happened? Or with photos or journals, and it's different with memoir because I was really trying to make everything as factual as possible. But no, I don't think it feels in the end like this was just one possible way to tell one small story about one thread of my life, and there are infinite possibilities, which is really overwhelming, but that is the truth.
And Al or Jade, maybe.
I'll piggyback off of Nina's comment because I mean it parallels some of my thinking about it too. Like I don't come away from the writing ever feeling certain, and I often rework the same ideas over and over again in subsequent poems. Like it is just like a variation on something at that given moment, and then I will probably revisit it in another way in other poems. Like, you know, we have our obsessions, right? And we are always coming back to these obsessions, and so I'm always trying to find new ways of thinking or looking at it through a poem, right? And so like Nina was saying, like it's just like one possible way of thinking of this material at this time. I wish it was certain because then I'm like I can get rid of this. I'm like I'm done with this. But it never feels, you know, certain at the end of it. You know?
Jade, do you want to answer this one? No pressure if not. Okay, we're gonna pass on this. Well, so I have kind of a, what I think maybe is like a softball question that I'm always curious about and I don't hear enough about in interviews and Q&A sometimes. This is for Nina and Al, both of you. I'm interested in the cover art for these books. And I feel like that is something, I mean, there sometimes is a story, sometimes it is a long road to get to it, but I'm just curious about the story with both of yours.
I'll go. Well, here's the cover of mine. It's I really like it. The story, there isn't really much of a story. They sent me a couple early, well, actually my publisher sent me one early one that had an Instagram photo of my mother when she was young that they had found on my Instagram. And it was really like a little bit jarring because I was just sort of like, oh, it was kind of like I guess it was just like a trial run, but it ended up prompting an interesting conversation because I talked to my mother and a couple other people about the fact that even though I love this photo and in a way it sort of like represents, you know, she's obviously a huge part of my everything and is a big part of the book. But that felt a little bit too personal for me. And so I said, I don't, and I also think so much of this book is like kind of really grotesque stuff about like being in this obsessive relationship with like a very, very dark, bad person. And I just didn't even want my mom's like beautiful face on it. But then this was the second idea they came back with and I loved it because I feel like it's very dark, but also playing with these kind of like very feminine colors. And it's like a really kind of like femi-goth cover that really suits my whole shtick.
I love that. That's good to hear just because I think they're both such dynamic covers in different ways, but they do the same mental work for me. So I'm curious about both. Yeah.
Okay, I was having trouble unmuting myself. So, I mean, this is the cover to the book. So Originally, I had reached out to an artist for the cover, but he wouldn't let me use his artwork, so fuck him. And so that was part of it. But then I was thinking more about the cover, and I didn't want really to use illustration. I was getting every time I looked at book covers, I didn't really illustration or any sort of figurative work didn't really feel right for the book for me. So I started going through like book covers and seeing the ones that I liked. And I found a book cover. I can't even remember the name of the book. It was just like this really dynamic and colorful book cover. So I just sent over the cover to the press and said, hey, I liked something kind of like this, sort of in this vein. And so they came back with a whole bunch of different covers. I think they gave me like 7 different samples. And there was like a few different color schemes for this particular cover. And I just really love the pink. And I was like thinking to myself, also in purely like marketing capitalist terms, I'm like, well, this will stand out. This is the sort of thing that smacks you in the face. And so I was like, and that's kind of what I want the book cover to do. You go to AWP and you walk down the rows and rows of like books, and seeing something bright and colorful is the sort of thing that makes you stop and makes me want to pick up the book and grab it. It's totally like purely I would say in purely cynical terms, but it was definitely a big factor. It was like, how much can I get people's attention with this cover?
I think that's great. I think it's really helpful because I know we do have emerging writers here as well, but it's a part that I think is not necessarily talked about enough, what your book will look like on the outside. So thank you both. I love this one. This is a good question in the chat for the 3 of you. If maybe Jade, you want to start with this one, if you're ready. Question, is reading your work aloud to yourself or others a part of your editing process? And does it lead to more ... uncertainty? And Jade, you don't have to go first, but I'm interested in your answer for this too. So either way.
Yeah, I guess the simple answer is just yes, absolutely. When I'm editing, I always read my work aloud, and I walk around, I print it out, I paste it around the apartment, and even just reading it to others, either in a public forum like this or in workshop, there's always edits coming to me. Well, I guess editing process also includes uncertainty, so there's that too. Yeah, and I really appreciate your question about book covers because I used to work in production. I know how important they are. So awesome.
Yeah.
I'll answer this one too. I always read aloud, and I'm a big believer in reading everything I write aloud, even if it's like, a short article or something. I think that you catch things when you read out loud. You can like totally hear it differently, but it does lead to more uncertainty. And it does lead to uncertainty in terms of how to read it if you are going to be reading it to an audience, because that's something I don't have a lot of experience with. That's part of the intimidation of reading with poets. There's like such just like it's like a differently intentioned thing, and I'm always like, oh shit, I'm just like reading this, without thinking about how to read it. But yeah, I think everyone should read out loud to themselves.
That's great.
I mean, yeah, I read out loud too. It is, I mean, like Nina and Jade have pointed out, like it allows you to catch certain things. And there's always this funny, like sort of subconscious thing when you hear yourself twist a phrase or add a word that isn't written down, and you're like, oh, I guess maybe that word does belong in this line or this sentence. And so it's something to add to. I think for me also, I mean, I run an open mic here in Rochester, and sometimes I'll read work, and man, when you read something and you realize, man, that did not land, and there is like something wrong with this poem, and you have to sit back. It's always, I like to use those places as, sort of like a workshop without the stress of all the feedback that you might get from some other people. But so absolutely. As far as like this issue of uncertainty, I mean, yes, right? I mean, like, and but that uncertainty never goes away with any sort of writing, right? Even after you've, I think one of the most common experiences too is like, even after you've read it, you've edited, you go to hit the submit button for a submission, and you're like, oh shit, I should have like edited this line, or whoops, that was the wrong. It's just a never-ending process until you finally just decide to abandon it and let it go.
Like that. Yeah. I think a big question I do have for the three of you, and then I will get back to chat questions. I am curious, especially with the three readings we heard tonight, sort of the politics about writing about other people, through the lens of your own life, your own view. I wondered if each of you could talk a little bit about, that experience. What is off limits? What is your story to tell? And that might be too big a question. So maybe just in the work that you read or what you may currently be working on. That would be great. Trying to leave it open here for the masses. And I can call on someone if that helps. I'm gonna go for Nina first.
That's a really good question, and it was a really big part of my process because there were a lot of people implicated in the stories I told in this book. One in particular, who was the person I had a long relationship with, and fortunately, I had his buy-in, and I sort of knew early on that I was going to give a draft of this book to family members and to that particular ex and to some other people who were mentioned in it. And I was really fortunate to have their support, but it's definitely something I thought about ethically as I was writing, especially because I was writing about people in my life with substance use disorder, and I was writing about my own drinking and drug use and eventually getting sober, and I could be sort of very flippant or careless, and kind of like self-deprecating or loathing writing about my own stuff, and then that would sort of like seep into my writing about other people, and I would have to kind of correct myself that I shouldn't necessarily bring that tone to writing about other people's choices. So that was like a constant concern for me, and I feel good about what I wrote, but I also feel like I just think that it's hard to like definitively know that you haven't crossed any lines there. I just sort of handled that by making sure everybody had read it before it went to, before it was like actually officially published. And fortunately, my family is close and everybody was great. But that's tricky. I'm interested to hear how these guys deal with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you both are interested in answering, maybe we will go Al next. Yeah.
Sure. So the way I look at it, I think of writing as sort of like two phases, right? And so there's the part in which I think there is nothing off limits, and that's the drafting, and that's the writing, and that's the process. Anything goes as far as I'm concerned. Every terrible thought, everything, it's a free for all. But that's also not necessarily all the things I need to share with the public. I think it's important for me to give myself permission to explore those things without the pressure of having to reveal all of it, right? This is like, I want to give myself that space to be messy, and to work my way through an idea or something, some issue. And, some of the things are, there's a lot of writing that is related to family. And so, there's considerations I have to make about any of the stuff that I am willing to reveal or share with others. So on the one hand, I try not to put those sort of constraints on myself, but I'm particular or about how or what I end up putting out there for the public consumption, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I really like what you say about the drafting phase where anything goes, and then kind of the reality after that. Yeah. And Jade, do you want to answer this? I'm very interested if you do.
Yeah, I second what Albert was saying about the drafting phase sort of being anything goes, and I think I'm in a, when it comes to my family, I'm a sort of particular situation because I'm not close with them, and a lot of my immediate family doesn't read English, doesn't speak a lot of English, so they're never going to read my poetry, and part of that is freeing, but the other part is just very sad. So when I approach poetry, I it's like no barriers, and and then the ones that do read English and speak English, obviously, I'm not particularly close with them, and so it's an interesting dilemma to be in, and it's not like a position I would wish on anyone, but it also allows me so much freedom. It allows me to really touch on topics that some people just could never write about, and I understand that, having been in spaces with other writers who are survivors, and when it comes to more like broader social political issues, I think what I try to keep in mind is that um, we're all sort of implicated in the system, and so if I choose to say write about a Kai girly, it's I'm doing it because um, I feel like I've already been called into, like, called to action, because the officer who killed Akai is Chinese American, and I am Chinese American, and the in a conversation, right, the aunt of Akai was talking to John Liu, who's a former comptroller of New York City, and she's like, "You're the problem. You are part of the problem, just like Peter Liang is part of the problem." And she was really shitting on John Liu for rallying behind Peter Liang and sort of like financing these pro Liang protests. So in a way, I felt called into the issue. So it was like, how can I not write about this? But it's tricky, right? Because it's not like I can ask the family for permission and open up those wounds, or have that kind of conversation, or like go into their life. So it's more of like a public art or good, I guess. Hope that answers the question.
I love that. I think these were, all three were incredibly thoughtful, very useful answers for people. So thank you for that. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to make the most of this. There is a question I'm interested in, especially because we've talked about the politics of writing about other people. So this question is, how do you decide how to read your work to an audience? And I think that could be interpreted as musically or sonically, like the performance of reading, maybe. I'm interested in also not just how you're reading it, but how you decide what to read of a selection. It's an interesting thought. And I could call on people again. You only have a few minutes, I could do it.
I feel like I haven't gone first, and I feel like I should go first because that's it's only fair. As far as like, I mean, obviously, the first consideration is time, right? How much time do I have, and I need to fill in that time. But also, as far as like what, yeah, I always want, and with a new book, I'm obviously trying to help promote it. So I'm choosing specific poems from there. One I think is the strongest work, most representative of what the collection does. But I also get tired of reading the same stuff over and over and over again. So I'm always trying to work in some newer things, or things that I've done relatively recent, because it's just more, you're always excited about the new shit. And so that's what I want to read. And ultimately, I do think of it as a sort of a mini arc in some ways. Like, I want there to be a certain rhythm, a certain arc to the reading. And so where I want it to end, I want, like, do I want a punchy ending? Do I want a quiet start? Those sort of things come into play when I'm like putting it together. And I really don't think about much about when I read it. I just like hope that it's okay. So
Yeah. Maybe Nina, if you're ready.
Yeah, that's a good question. My book is long and it covers like so much of my life from the time I was a kid to now. And so it's hard for me to choose things to read. At first, I was reading the things that I thought were sort of most like emblematic of the story, like those opening pages. And then when I got bored with that, I jumped around a little bit, but I have definitely found myself at readings where I feel that the audience is a bit more conservative, and I've wondered whether I should just like blast them with like opioid epidemic, but then I always do. I feel like the rebellious part of me is like, sorry guys, this is what you're getting. So I have read some rather grisly parts to audiences that I think might have found them a little bit eye-opening, but that's part of the work of this book and of writing. So I feel good about that.
Absolutely. I love that. Jade, do you want to weigh in on this, our final question of the night?
Was it how do you pick a piece, or
Yeah, I think the initial question was, how do you read your work? And that could be musically, performance-wise, and also my added on question, how do you select what to read from a body of work?
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't have a huge body of work, honestly. So the pool I'm picking from is a lot smaller. I'm still in grad school and hopefully working towards my first book. And yeah, I think of it as an invitation to the audience to look with me, to feel with me. And in terms of like when I'm actually reading, I try to be in touch with my body and pay attention to breath. And if like I'm starting to feel angry, then I sort of like go with it, and yeah, I don't know what else to add besides that. And I hope people feel invited and compelled and to sort of join all of our movements, which are, varied. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a beautiful place to leave us. I just so appreciate the audience. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our incredible readers. I love this event in particular so much. Thank you to Maris and McNally Jackson. I don't know, Maris, do you want to play us out? I think we're doing this. Yes, I love you all. Thank you. Please buy these books and find us on the internet. Be safe, be nice to each other. Thank you so much.